Audits and Governmental Efficiency Committee. I'm Councilmember Jose Huizar. I've been joined by Councilmember Zine. And this meeting, today's theme is city billing and collections. We have 3 items, and I think it's a very timely theme given the budget situation that we find ourselves in. And we will now go to item number 1. If the clerk can please read that item.
Item number 1 are reports from the City Controller, Office of Finance, Fire Department, Bureaus of Engineering and Sanitation, Planning Department, and Environmental Affairs Department relative to an audit of citywide billing and collection practices.
And we've been joined today by Controller Laura Check. She will present this item.
So, good afternoon, Council Members Huizar and Zine. Yes, I couldn't agree more about, anyway, this is an opportunity, I'm hoping, to move forward on some improvements that have been long overdue. On June 11th, I released an audit of citywide billing and collection practices, and I'm going to try and briefly present the report to you today, and then I'm sure you'll have questions of my office and the departments. What I know we're most interested in hearing is the progress that's occurred, because now we're, over a half a year later. So to look at what has happened in this interim period. Our city has so many unmet needs and demands for services, and I have always felt very strongly that we should focus on trying to collect all the money that's legitimately owed us. The monies collected for fees, penalties, fines, and permits are all used to hire police officers, firefighters, fill potholes, trim trees, buy library books, and provide other essential services. This report made 35 recommendations. Some are just common sense and relatively easy to implement. For example, departments need to follow up on delinquent accounts in a timely manner. They need to be referred to the Office of Finance or a collection agency within a reasonable period of time. We all know what happens when they sit around for too long. They become uncollectible. I think you just wrote off some uncollectible debt this morning as one of your agenda items in council. Other recommendations take the political will and leadership to make them happen. For instance, there should be a comprehensive citywide database of accounts receivable. Luckily, this is part of the city's overall FMS replacement project, and we are moving forward on it. Some of the important findings. We are unable to determine the total accounts receivable at any given time. This should be broken down by age of account. Secondly, departments don't even know sometimes if we've billed for each and every service provided. Businesses, private sector businesses, go under if they engage in the same kind of practices. We need to look at the possible elimination of the citywide collection unit. Departments refer amounts over $1,000 to this unit for collections, and my audit finds that it's potentially a much better use of precious city personnel to refer these bills to outside collections agencies with the expertise and vested interest in obtaining the monies. Since collection agencies do not charge the city for their services, I mean, they take a piece of the action, but that's action we're not seeing now. And the Office of Finance, it's very clear that they're having problems providing the needed oversight to other departments' collection efforts. So one of our thoughts is transfer the staff from the citywide collection unit inside the Office of Finance to do more of those oversight functions until we get our city departments doing their collections exactly the way they should. If we refer out to collections, it would help free up as many as 20 investigators and clerical staff in the Office of Finance. Every dollar is precious to the city. It would be a shame if we did not make collecting the monies owed us a top priority. I also want to comment, because so many of the findings and issues in the Office of Finance audits that are items 2 and 3 are in other audits of mine, ambulance billings, false alarm. One of the things that I find stunning is that across the board, we have not been having city departments look on a very frequent, regular basis to make sure that all of our fines and fees are raised up according to the cost of living increase, et cetera. We've got, my audits have found in various departments that we haven't raised fees for 6, 8, 10 years. Well, we know the costs of providing the services for which the fees are being assessed. Those costs have gone up, but we're not raising the fees and fines along with them. And I'm really sorry to say that it looks like the police department and I think also the fire department did, in June of 2007, submit their analysis and their recommendations for raising some very many key fees and fines, and there's been no action taken on it. It's just sitting there.
You know what committee that's stuck in?
Pardon?
You know what committee that's stuck in? Where it's stuck?
No, I think, and I'll let the experts explain it to you, but my understanding is those reports were submitted to the CAO, council mayor. I mean, you eventually need to have them submitted to you, and you need to vote on them.
Right.
And I'm assuming that hasn't happened, but you count the months, since June to now,
Right.
of significant increases in fees that are very appropriate for us to be charging, and they haven't gone through. So, at any rate, my auditors are here to answer your questions, and, I mean, I am very pleased to say that the Office of Finance and my office have worked very closely together on this report and moving forward. Yeah, it would be really, as a city council member, I introduced a council motion back in the 90s that said, we've got so many departments doing their own collections, and we've got so much money sitting on the table. Why don't we have a revenue manager, and why aren't we centralizing all of our revenue collections? And I know there are reasons why some have not been centralized yet, but we're not in the 21st century on this stuff yet, guys. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've been talking about handheld devices in the fire department to capture data out in the field so that we can collect from insurance companies, not from uninsured patients, from insurance companies on ambulance billings. So I know especially in hard times we should be looking at it, but your city controller's pitch is we should have been looking at this all along. Millions of dollars that we haven't pulled in that belong to us. So I'm thrilled it's before you and that we're very serious about this, and maybe the pressure of horrific hard times will get us to do a better job on this.
Well, thank you very much, Controller, and certainly we as a committee are looking forward to to follow up on some of the recommendations you've made. I know the Finance Department is following up on some, but it seems like on most of these recommendations, the Finance Department is working with you on and agrees with them, but there's one or two maybe that needs, that they disagree.
Well, and in some cases, Councilman, we're talking about data systems and technology that they don't have.
Yeah.
I think one of our recommendations is exploring the feasibility of centralizing accounts receivable and billing. Well, we're moving ahead on the accounts receivable. I'm not sure about the billing piece. So some of the recommendations, quite frankly, there's some hurdles, that one in particular.
Okay. Any questions?
Do you find that it's mostly technology is the problem, or okay? Because I know we've talked about the ambulance billing, which I'm working in the fire department, and I went out on a paramedic run to see exactly how we get the information. Oftentimes that when it is transcribed through the third person, instead of it being in a Hertz, I always said the handheld. Hertz Rent-A-Car can do it all this. We should be able to do that. And they were doing triplicate, and I, really having to press hard to get it on the other side. So
well, in that
technology.
You're right in that sense. I guess why I was shaking my head is in many cases it's that we're not referring bills for collection in a timely manner. And on the subject of ambulance billings, it has been brought to my attention that New York City, if not others, have privatized the ambulance billing collections. I spoke to firefighters in New York City and to the people in charge of having made that happen. It was a smooth transition. The dollars collected have unbelievably increased. There have been no objections and no problems with the union, and it works. So they've gone beyond just thinking about data in the field and have decided that bill collecting and ambulance billing does not have to be done using sworn personnel and inside their fire department, and they have given it to an outside company. And this has been more than just a year or two, and they've got a very successful track record. I mean, it is time to start. It's not even thinking out of the box. It's thinking 21st century, because every single dollar that we collect, more than what we're collecting now, goes to hiring more sworn personnel.
And are the standardized procedures you feel are not citywide? There isn't really standardized on the collection. I mean, each individual department sometimes has different standards as to at what level. And
They're not following Office of Finance rules very often. Often they're not. And that's why I'm saying if we look at contracting out for the delinquent bills, that there might be a reallocation of human resources in the finance department to improve their oversight and monitoring and get departments to do it correctly, because they're the ones in charge of it. And they're not getting full cooperation
Look
from
at
all
the-
departments.
Business tax, which, ultimately we'd like to change how that operates, but currently there's a system in place. And we look at sometimes those smaller fish rather than the big fish. And if we took away those small fish, you could go out and see those that are located outside the city of Los Angeles but are doing business in the city of Los Angeles who are not paying business tax. But if you're in the city of Los Angeles, you are. And so there's some discrepancy. I know, again, they've done a much better job, Office of Finance has, I know, and since the time I've been here. But we can always use improvement. Okay. Thank you.
It seems that the policy exists, but it's not followed. Where it states city policies require departments to bill accounts within 5 days.
Right.
Providing service. The customer is then given 30 days to make a payment. Payment still has not been received. The account is considered to be delinquent. Within 45 days of delinquency, departments are required to refer accounts under 1,000 to an outside collections agency. Accounts 1,000 or more should be referred to Office of Finance citywide collection unit. I mean, we got a policy. And then,
By the way, that's progress from 10 years ago.
and then I look here, and it says, also found the departments did not consistently follow up on delinquent accounts or refer uncollected accounts to the Office of Finance or an outside collection agency as required. For example, Fire Department did not refer delinquent account totaling $1,055,230 until 1 to 2 years after they should have been referred. And then the LAPD had $7.8 million in outstanding alarm billing receivables as of December 31st, 2006. That resulted in accounts billed since 2004, estimated that approximately $4.7 million should have been referred to the Office of Finance or an outside collection agency. The LAPD only referred to $590,000. So we got a policy
Right.
that departments are not following, and then their general managers come to council and say, we need more money to provide services, and not collecting the money that should be collected or following procedures already in place.
You got it. You got it.
Case closed.
Well, thank you very much, Controller, as always, and we appreciate your comments and your hard work on these items. And we'll
Yeah,
follow-
no, you get to do the hard
No, we
work.
get to do the work. We'll, at this time, take up the Department of Finance and have a general response, and then afterwards, we'll take up any questions or comments from our council office, and then we'll go to public, from our council members, and then we'll go to a public comment.
I was trying to lift this up.
It's adjustable sometimes.
It's not easy to do.
Got a policy, don't follow it. Yeah, what have you done for this?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Antoinette Cristoval. I'm the Director of Finance. I wanted to speak to the Controller's report. And first of all, I do want to thank the Controller and her staff for the recommendations. We believe that the recommendations will help our office as well as the city assist in revenue collection efforts on a citywide basis. Although progress has been made in some areas, we do agree that further improvements are needed, and we have taken steps to implement recommendations that are contained in the report. Of particular importance, and as was discussed by the Controller, is the centralization of functions under the Office of Finance. We agree that with the Controller that this definitely needs to be addressed, and that it may be costly to put the infrastructure in place to centralize the process, but in the long term, we believe that the benefits would definitely outweigh the costs. At the direction of the mayor, the Office of Finance has taken steps to begin the feasibility process. One of the things that we have done, we've met with the ITA general manager regarding the technical assistance for the centralization of the billing and collection functions. We have met with the controller's FMS personnel to discuss the feasibility using the FMS system as a central repository. And we've also submitted a proposed budget package, which includes an implementation plan. It also includes the regularization of a key position to lead the centralization effort, as well as requesting assistance of a consultant to help with the feasibility study. As a result of our internal reorganization and efficiency gains, we have also reassigned staff from other units within the Office of Finance to assist with the citywide program. Previously, we had 2 employees. We now have 4 that are working on the citywide program. And because of that, we have been able to complete a number of reviews. 2 of them are before you today. One is the fire department, and the other is the police department. We currently have reviewed street services and zoo, and those are almost final, which we will hope to have to the council and mayor in the coming months. We're currently reviewing the Department of Sanitation and Building and Safety, and we hope to have transportation completed by fiscal year end.
Well, thank you. And, a number of these items in terms of correcting or implementing the recommendations by the audit, seems like it'll take some time before we get to that. So although we are talking about next year's budget situation, I'm wondering, in your estimation, how many of these recommendations can we implement now to realize some increased revenue for this coming fiscal year?
Well, a number of the recommendations that are included in the Controller's report, particularly as it relates to the Office of Finance, are currently underway. Some of them have already been implemented, and we think that that will definitely help improve revenue collection efforts. One of the major ones, as I indicated, centralization is definitely going to take some time to do. But as the Controller indicated, what's very important is that departments comply with the citywide billing and collection guidelines. And what that means is actually billing on accounts and referring delinquent accounts to the outside collection agencies in a timely manner. We believe that if you refer those accounts timely, the better the city has, the chance the city has of collecting on those delinquent accounts. So it's very key that that's done. The other thing that the Controller referred to, which I agree, is that we definitely need to look at ambulance billings. In particular, at least for a start, what would be really important is to amend the city's administrative code. I think is section 5.181 of the city's code, to allow for ambulance billings to be referred to outside collection agencies. That has yet to be done, and it's been at least my 7 years that I've been here, that has not happened. And we really think that that would help enhance collections for ambulance billings. The other is just making sure that departments are complying with the guidelines, as I indicated.
I have a question, though. We have guidelines. There's clear direction what to follow. If they don't pay the bill, this is what we do. The departments aren't following that process. So what do we do to hammer them over the head and have them follow the process?
Well, one thing that has greatly helped is that the Mayor's Office Performance Measurement Unit has been very much involved with the efforts of the Office of Finance in terms of advising or directing the general managers to comply with the guidelines. So we expect to see improvements, along the way. But, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And relative to the accounts receivable, one of the things that the mayor's office has done has required departments to submit quarterly reports of their accounts receivable accounts with the accounts aged from 30 days to 2 years out. And that information is being used by the mayor's office to assess the performance of the departments, and the mayor will be meeting with the department heads to have them address the reasons why accounts that are very old have not been collected on. And I think that's going to help greatly improve the operation and also improve the revenue collection of the city.
So I look at this as in a common sense fashion. General managers submit a budget. The mayor looks at the budget, brings it to the council, goes through budget finance. We debate back and forth, back and forth. This issue doesn't come up. This issue comes up on an audit that the controller performs. Your task is to get the money, and the general managers aren't complying. So now, 2008, we're trying to bring about some changes that should have been going on years ago. And if you don't pay your medical bill to a private doctor or a dentist or whatever, it's going to go to a collection, and if you don't pay it, you're going to get that mark on your FICO score, which is going to take you down. Maybe we need to do that, but the trouble I have is the general managers don't hesitate to ask for money or personnel, but they're not following the procedure to generate the dollars that are due the city so we can deliver the services and give them the resource they need to do the job. There's a big gap there. And I don't see how we have anything in place that's really going to compel, other than the mayor asked for something. But general manager's not performing, and there's obviously departments that aren't performing. There's got to be something else. The policy is very clear. This is what you do. You don't pay your license tags on time, there's a penalty. You don't pay that, then your car gets impounded. You drive without a license, you get stopped, you can get cited, go to jail, your car gets impounded. There's some serious consequences. We don't really see some serious consequences, and by the time 2 years comes by, that business is either out of that location or somewhere else, and then we write it off. So we're writing off millions and millions of dollars in a situation where we need millions to provide services, where it's ambulance services, police services, and all the other services. I mean, I find this appalling that this audit brings about this decay of the system where there's a policy very clearly explained what they need to do. No one's held them accountable. And it's been going on for, according to Laura Chick's hands, a long time. She put on a lot of fingers when she was flipping up the numbers. And she was here to see it was when she was a council member. Now as a controller, to audit and say, how do we get these departments to comply to bring in the dollars that we need to provide the services?
Well, I think many of the departments are here and they could speak to what they're doing, but I can certainly say on behalf of the mayor, I know that the mayor has stepped up efforts in this particular area with the performance measurements or metrics that are being used to basically determine whether departments are following the procedures that are in place and ensuring that department heads do what is necessary to collect all of the money that is due to the city. So that has actually happened. I don't know if anyone from the mayor's office is here that can speak more to it, but the mayor did address that to the general managers, and I know more will be coming from him in that regard.
Controller?
May I just going back to that ancient council motion of mine, why can't we centralize all collections in your office?
I think that that's something that definitely should be looked into, and as a matter of fact, the mayor has directed my office to do that. I'm going to need resources to, have the feasibility study, primarily because if you look at the various billing and collection systems throughout the city, they're integrated with other services or functions that department performs. So what needs to happen is that there needs to be an inventory of all of those systems. We need assistance from a technical standpoint in terms of what is needed in order to deliver the service centrally, and so as a result of that, I have included in my budget proposal an implementation plan, which would require some help in that regard.
And I know that Randy Levin of ITA is looking to get outside expert help to analyze all of these systems, and am I saying that right? Yeah. But it just seems like an overdue idea, and I know we'll hear from various parts of the city how and why we can't, but I think there's a way to do it that would improve the whole thing.
And I think,
I just,
I think that one reason I was asking that technology, because
Yeah.
if the technology exists to be able to have the referral, because collecting, it's expertise in how you collect. Doesn't necessarily, there is no need for an expertise as to whether it's the fire department, the police department, building and safety, whatever it is. It's really, the expertise is in collecting it. There's some unique with fire. We know that a large portion are those that are unable to pay, so we know there's a portion of that. But the others, it's really insurance companies or so, and that is similar in some of those other categories. There was one recommendation that you made, Laura, in the Office of Finance, which is instead of in some of those categories, I think it was 1,000. Referring directly rather than going through Office of Finance and then to Allied. Did it make sense to go directly to Allied? So I was interested in the Office of Finance position.
Yes. One of the things that we had indicated in our response to the Controller's Office is that there are other functions that the Citywide Collections Unit performs over and above the collecting on delinquent accounts. But first of all, I want to say that with the increase in the threshold from 1,000 to 3,000 accounts, $3,000, which is the threshold for accounts being referred to collection agencies, the outside collection agencies currently handle about 84% of the accounts within the city of Los Angeles. The Citywide Collection Unit only handles 16%.
On delinquent.
On delinquent accounts, I'm sorry.
Now
Yes,
those,
on delinquent.
that 84%, those that get of the total amount, I guess I'm saying is if they get referred to your department first and you do your best, okay, no.
Well, not all of them. Accounts that are $3,000 or less, delinquent accounts, those accounts are referred directly to the collection agencies. Accounts that have a value of $3,000 or greater are referred to the Office of Finance. And
So 84% are
84% are
less
referred to
than
collection.
3,000. And
That's correct, right. And so with regards to that, what we have done, we have put into place a program, a pilot basis where we are comparing ourselves against the outside collection agencies, because my staff function like a collection agency. And so because we have seen based on our results that we have a higher collection rate. But that doesn't preclude us from ultimately having all of that work done outside of the city. We just want to evaluate that, and so we've done that, and we expect to have results back to the controller, the mayor, and council by the end of the fiscal year.
it's great. Who's ever doing it best should be doing it.
Yeah. I think that was one of the major disagreements, but, so what I would like to do, unless there's any other questions, is ask,
I just have one question. Police department, for example, drunk driver, wrong way in the freeway causes mass chaos, as we saw on the 118 this morning. A lot of resources deployed there. There's a law that says they can be billed for that. Are we doing that?
I believe the police department could speak to that, but I think that they are. And actually, we handle part of that, and it does require a lot of work effort, and that's something that I would prefer to have that done outside of my office because of the amount of time and effort and the value that you receive from that.
Because there's thousands of dollars in resources, police, fire, Department of Transportation, and there's a bill that passed a number of years ago permitting cities to charge those people. You get arrested for drunk driving, you go through the court system, you can also charge the people getting drunk driving crashes for all the resource deployed. It's a huge revenue, and I don't know if we're going after it.
I'll ask Mark O'Brien, do you know the answer to that?
And if we're not going after it, we should go after it.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
We actually do have a program in place for the DUI cost recovery program. However, it was limited up until 2 years ago to $1,000. And since then,
40,000 drunk drivers, that's a lot.
yeah, and so actually we had have a program in place with the Los Angeles Police Department, and that threshold has been raised to $10,000, I believe, or $12,000, and actually to include some of the other costs, river rescues,
Right.
et cetera. However, I believe there's a task force that was created, headed by the CAO's office. I don't know where that is specifically, but we continue to process the DUI cost recovery.
So it seems like there's a lot of issues that is resting in the CAO, the CLA, that haven't really come forward, other than what you say on this particular. But there's other issues where there's cost recovery, the alarm systems, the police response, et cetera, where we can generate dollars from that. They're supposed to be fined, pay the fine, and that whole process that's in place. I mean, it's kind of like a user fee. You use the service, you're going to pay for it. And then if you're not paying for it, you're not getting the money to do what you need to do.
That is correct, and most of those delinquent accounts would be referred to outside collection agencies because of the dollar value.
Right, okay. But we do have that. What about for, what other issues are we charging for municipal services? For example, there was a situation recently on Sepulveda where this backyard fell onto Sepulveda Boulevard, caused, not due to any city issue. Do we then charge that owner for the DOT, the personnel that are deployed to direct traffic for 12, 14 hours? Or is that just written off?
My understanding is that the government code has been amended in the last few years to allow for municipalities and districts to collect in these cases, but we have not received any referrals, any delinquent referrals.
So there's a gap that we need to plug when the city resources are used for some incident that takes place, not because of any city liability, but because of whatever happens. An airplane decides to land on Main Street and cause chaos. That airline should then be billed for all the services that are rendered. We don't have that, but we should be able to do that, from what you're telling me the law is.
My understanding is, yes, that there had been recent legislation allowing for the recovery of those types of costs. We can follow up with that to...
So where would we go for that? I mean, if the law's there permits it, why aren't we, who do we then go to say, kick it in, make it happen?
Well, I think it's something that, I know that the CAO's office, they're definitely looking at revenue opportunities for the city, and as part of maybe their financial status report, that's something that could be included in there. They could look at it citywide. Our office basically handles any delinquent accounts that have been referred, so I think that the place should begin with the CAO's office.
Okay, thank you.
If I may add, we also pursue property damage cases as well. When a traffic light or lamp standard is damaged and we can identify a responsible party, the citywide collection unit reviews the police report, determines liability, recommends a billing be rendered, and pursues those types of claims.
A fire plug gets knocked over in a car crash?
Actually,
Same
yes,
thing.
that would be referred to DWP.
Will they go after it for the money?
Yes.
Okay. Thank
Sorry.
you.
Two other quick questions. The comment was made, penalties and interest charged range among departments. I know that may be a controller question. Is there a way in which maybe it's instructing the CAO and CLA to come back and say, let us know, because it isn't consistent necessarily. And we introduced a motion to look at, which they're going to come back, on the false alarm fees, because police department has, have penalties, fire department does not. There is some suggestion that the companies are using the fire department versus the LAPD for that and have some consistency. So I don't know which department it is under that we would look at that to have consistency.
Well, relative to the Office of Finance, one of the things that we do when we review the various departments, we do look at whether or not they're complying with the citywide guidelines. And the citywide guidelines recommend that interest and penalties be applied to delinquent accounts. The interest part really to pay for the loss revenue that the city could otherwise have, and then the penalty piece to really enforce collection on that delinquent account. There's not one size fits all. It really depends on the type of service in terms of particularly as it relates to the penalty piece. The interest piece, we believe for the most part could be applied citywide, but what would be required as we're reviewing each of the departments is that each of the departments would need to have the ordinance amended for that related service to allow for interest and penalties to apply. And so that's something that one of the things that we recommended in the in the police report that we did that the interest and penalties should be applied. And I believe we did the same for fire in places where it was not. But what that would require is the fire and police department to have the related ordinances for their types of service amended. And the Office of Finance is prepared to work with the departments should they decide to go forward with that, to help them with the ordinance and also to help them identify the best practice for the interest and penalty related to that particular service.
It'd just be interesting. I don't know if there's a compilation that the Controller's Office may have done this and looking at which departments have penalties for as part of that collection process, or fees or permits, and charge interest if there are ones that do not. Kind of a list, so we would be able to say, building and safety and fire department, not the same, that should be different, but maybe fire department, LAPD, in this instance should be the same, and would sometimes be a deterrent. So.
Well, that's something that we can do in the Office of Finance. We've been doing it on a case-by-case basis as we review the department. We look at everything in totality relative to that particular department, but we could do a survey of the various city departments that collect revenue.
That would be great.
And find out whether or not they charge interest and our penalty and what the amounts are. And we could also take it a step further and benchmark with other cities to see what they're charging.
I think that would be great, because sometimes it's just been around for 20 years and it hasn't increased necessarily. And sometimes, again, the whole idea is we want people to pay on time. We really don't want to charge them penalties or interest, but we also want it to be painful enough that they won't do that again. And so we found that even with, success on the alarm penalties, permit fees, and so forth that we've seen when they do get a false alarm, penalty, that we've seen the number of false alarms go down dramatically, and I'm sure they could let us know. I think it's 45% that's gone down. One other suggestion, I think, which was recommendation number 3, which was on developing the receivables. And as we saw this year, with the fact that our revenues have been much less than we had anticipated, and I know Ms. Chick had mentioned that in some of her correspondence and reports, and that it seemed like there was no standardization as well, or checking on that, because each department determines what they think their receivables are going to be, and whether or not there should be a review of their effectiveness and tools that they're using for their receivables. So again, just to use an example, and I'll just use fire and police, nothing against them, but fire department does a really good job of knowing, and they consistently every year have been on target, whereas LAPD may not have been. Again, just an example. I don't know if that's necessarily true. Does anyone look at their receivables each year and how they are on target or off target and adjust accordingly?
Are you referring to what their budgeted receipts are compared to what they actually receive?
Mm-hmm. And particularly on this.
I think the CAO's office is involved with that, because that's part of the overall revenue forecasting and what they anticipate to collect. What we do in the Office of Finance is that we're looking to make sure that they're billing and collecting properly, and that it's tied to the guidelines, and it is the best practice, not only citywide, but across the United States, because we believe that if those guidelines are applied, that it definitely will enhance revenue collections throughout the city.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. Pretty good.
Thank you. We have 3 public comments, and then I'll make a recommendation on how to proceed from here. The first is Mel Khan from Vika. After Mel Khan is Brendan Huffman, and also Carl Olson.
Valley good.
Good afternoon. I'm Brendan Huffman, CEO of Vika, Valley Industry and Commerce Association. And with me are some of my members, and I'll get to them in a second. Several years ago, we worked together with you closely on enacting business tax reform. And we are very appreciative of the reductions in the gross receipts tax, which we think is improving LA's business climate. During the BTAC process, there was a lot of concern about how reducing gross receipts taxes would also impact revenues to the city. We proved them wrong. But we feel it's our responsibility to continue our partnership with you, and we are very sensitive about the budget deficit the city is facing this year and the budget deficit the city will be facing next year as well. We've taken the initiative to take a closer look at some of the audits that the Controller's Office has provided and some of the budget issues that you are addressing right now. And in the spirit of partnership, we have put together our own report, and it's Vika's top 40 ways to address LA's budget deficit, as well as the top 10 ways to generate revenue, mostly through job creation and commerce. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mel Cohn, who's a CPA in the Valley, longtime Vika board member, and is also is the chair of Vika's Audit Subcommittee, which has been working with our membership, two of whom are here today, to look at these audits more carefully and come up with these recommendations before you, which I'll hand out momentarily.
Thank you, Brendan. I am Mel Cohn with Kirschcone Bridge CPAs, and I'm chair of Vika's Audit Subcommittee. I'd like to thank Chair Weezer and council members Zine and Gruhl for giving us the opportunity to appear here today. I'd also like to thank the Controller, Laura Chick, for her report and many reports that we have looked at and her ongoing work, which is relevant why we're here today. Our Audit Subcommittee, just as a brief history, was formed in response to the release of the Controller's Report the summer of 2007 related to the audit of billing and collections in the city. Our subcommittee has examined the debts owed, we've examined the collection process, and our committee has spent quite a bit of time looking at it and also the recommendations you see here today. Our observations on debt collection is not what a business would look at to see what we have today. We have watched as debts have been uncollected over 9 months since the release of the audit. Many departments released letters of support for the audit and its recommendations, but since then, there has been little or no action, and which is one of the reasons listing here today. We see the same thing. We have sent letters to different departments inquiring about the implementation of the controller's suggestions with no response. There seems to be an inherent lack of coordination in addressing the collection issue, and few are willing to become accountable. And accountable is really the key word, which I think you heard in the controller's report and today. With so much debt on the table, it is entirely possible that the collection of many of these debts in a timely manner could have significantly reduced, if not eliminated, the city's budget deficit we're now facing. Vika was really shocked to learn that the city has on the balance sheet uncollected accounts receivable or debt of $500 million as of June 30th, 2006. With a budget deficit of $168 million facing us this year, that money that the city is owed should be collected before it's too late. The controller reported as of June 30th, 2006 in her report, gross accounts receivable were $672 million, with uncollectible accounts of $502 million. How would any business or government like to have their uncollectibles at 74.7% of their accounts receivable? For the succeeding year, which was June 30th, 2007, gross receivables were $629 million, and uncollectible accounts were only $448 million. Well, at least we dropped. We went from 74.7 to 71.2%. Can you imagine the amount of dollars that is sitting out there? We don't understand why there's been no outcry, either from the council, the mayor, or the general public. But we are here today to generate this outcry. In reading the reports, the only suggestions we've heard from the public and from government right now to help the budget crisis is to cut expenses. Why not collect your bills? Just think about it. $488 million, $448 million as of June 30th, 2007. And all we're hearing about is efforts to cut expenses when we have this pot of money sitting out there? In reading the reports, it's interesting, and Councilman Zine made the observation, same as us. There are really no material differences in most of the reports the controller issues, and especially this one, as to her findings. There are no disagreements. All we have in these reports, and reading the responses which Vika did, is we have a variety of excuses, and we again wonder, it talks about citywide policy with no follow-up. And that's because there's no accountability. And this is why we're sitting with $448 million. The report focuses on billings and collections. Billing procedures are much more difficult. Billing procedures that are more efficient and less costly.
Have your attention, please. We will be testing the fire life safety system. Please disregard any alarms you see or hear. Once again, we will be testing the fire life safety system. Please disregard any alarms you see or hear.
Is that part of your presentation?
The fire department thought we were going to be listening to their audit right now, so they
Should we bring them
put that
up?
out right now. So they wanted us to make sure we finished on time.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Chairman. The report focuses on billing and collections, but let's be realistic. The billing procedures that are more efficient and less costly will take time to fix. However, if you proceed immediately to address the uncollected accounts receivable, that has got to be mandatory to bring dollars into the city treasury. There should be no reason why that can't be implemented. Vika has released its report today, which was handed to the clerk, which lays out 10 ways to generate revenue in Los Angeles and the top 40 ways to balance the budget. The report gives the council suggested tools to address the budget deficit, and in really many creative ways that don't raise taxes, and that's really important, that don't raise taxes, and that significantly impact the delivery of services. It includes suggestions from Controller Chicks and other policymakers. The majority come from Vika's membership and other business leaders. We encourage you to take this document, review its suggestions, and utilize it as a policy tool. I think it will prove helpful in addressing the failures in collection, as well as the failures to properly generate revenue for the city. Also, very important in this document, it provides 40 suggestions for addressing, again, the budget deficit without raising taxes. In conclusion, I want to thank you for allowing us the opportunity to be here, because it is time to address the important issue. With proper collections of the debts, we think it is entirely possible that the city would have been able to avoid much of its current debt situation. Furthermore, proper debt collection practices in the future will be vital to ensuring that we don't find ourselves in the situation we're in today. Vika strongly recommends that this committee request within 60 days a plan with a report to recover outstanding debts be delivered to this committee. It is too urgent to sit and wait while we go through, and I must say, bureaucratic processes. This is a crisis. This is a fiscal crisis, and we're asking you to ask this report done, and we can come back here in 60 days and hopefully have many solutions. We are also offering Vika's resources to help solve this problem. Please let business help you in this, as we have done in the past. And I want to thank you for your time, and again, urge you, start with the controller's report. There's 35 items there, but please, let's collect this money. There's no reason to have $448 million as of June 30th and that we can't collect it. Thank you.
Councilman, I just want to introduce two people who schlepped down here from the West Valley who thought this hearing was so important, and we're also active members of our audit subcommittee. Lynn Rinker is our first vice chair of the Vika board and a realtor, and Carl Olson is an active member of our audit subcommittee as well, and teaches accounting on the side.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for your input, and I think what you have presented is some very valuable information. And but it's not only the information that you're presenting, but it's the urgency that you're prodding this council and this committee to look into this a bit more intently, and this committee, we intend to do that. Typically, we hear audit reports. We take the controller's recommendations very seriously, try to work with the departments to implement those, but then the report leaves our jurisdiction. On this one, and leaning over and talking to Mr. Zine, we think of it's of such importance that we will keep this report in committee, follow up with the Department of Finance and the departments, so that we not only get a timeline for the implementation of some of the recommendations in Ms. Chick's report, but also continue to follow up periodically, perhaps every 30 days, 60 days, so that we see ensure the implementation of those recommendations. And also on the 10 ways to generate revenue in Los Angeles and the top 40 ways to balance LA's budget. Thank you for those recommendations. We're certainly going to look at those seriously and see how we could also insert them into the discussion in budget and finance as we move forward. So thank you very much. Any questions or comments?
Just want to thank, I mean, all these individuals have been very active when we did business tax reform, and what we've seen is they're roll up their sleeves kind of individuals, and also do follow up and nice nudges as to making sure that we're doing what we said we were going to do. And you're right. I mean, people leave here and they go back, and the departments have all of the interest in following the recommendations, but something happens along the way in prioritization and other issues. And I often say to the departments, let us know when there's a glitch. Let us know when there's a problem, because Office of Finance, for example, can instruct and ask these other departments and kind of wait for them to respond. And we have a little pull with those departments if they're not responding, and that we need to know that, as well as the controller, and to use these examples and ensure that it goes citywide, not just some of the each of the individual departments. And so it's exciting to see some of these changes. But we, as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, and your leadership, to make sure that it's not just a report that sits on the shelves and no one focuses on it, because it's real money that we're losing. And I'm looking forward to, as we talk to the police department today too, because we've been working with them closely on those alarm fees, and particularly the permit fees, which you'll hear many of those people who are permitted. And unfortunately, the alarm companies were able to get legislation on the state that says we can't get it directly from them. Or maybe be able to explain that. So, but there may be some other ways we can look at that issue. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you, and also please don't hesitate to reach out to Vika or any of the business groups in the city, and we look forward to being back here in no less than 60 days to hear the results. And I'm very serious about that.
Probably even sooner than that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. On item number one, what I'd recommend with the agreement of my colleagues is that we get a report back from our Department of Finance on any dollar amounts that may be realized for the next fiscal year through the recommendations made in the controller's report. Also, a timeline in which these recommendations may be implemented, and any additional information required to implement those recommendations. And we will hear this back within 45 days in this committee. Is that any official language I need to put in there, Clerk, or is that
Yes.
in terms of holding the item in here for 45 days?
Then
Is
this item is continued for 45 days, and those direction should be just given now, and that in 45 days, the department should be reporting on your list of instructions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Concurrence of, yes.
Point of clarification, some of the recommendations were directed by the controller to various departments. Is it your request to have the Office of Finance coordinate the department's responses or implementation
Yes, if you
plan
could
as well?
coordinate that for the departments, but by this, we're requesting from the departments to report back, but if the Department of Finance could coordinate those responses back to this committee.
All right.
Great. Thank you. And we still have two other items that are relevant to the first item. They will now drill down a bit more in depth to the fire department and the police department. So with that, we'll go to item 2 at this time, City Clerk.
Item number 2 is the Office of Finance report and the Los Angeles Fire Department report relative to the billing and collections operation of the fire department.
Thank you. We could first have a report from the Controller's office, but you might want to sit up here as well for the Finance Department. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Was this all, this, okay, 1 second. I'm sorry, Office of, yes, I'm sorry, Office of the Finance, I'm sorry, that the Controller also did a report on this.
Thank you. To my left is Jeff Whitmore. He's the revenue manager. He's within the Office of Finance, and he works directly for my office. He will assist in responding to any questions that you might have. The Office of Finance completed a review of the Los Angeles Fire Department, and as a result of our review, we identified a number of findings and recommendations within the department that we felt should be addressed. I do want to thank Chief Berry and his staff for their cooperation and certainly taking steps to improve revenue collections within the fire department. I think there's still more work that needs to be done. And a few points that I want to make is with regards to ambulance billings. About 78% or $60 million of the fire department's revenue comes from ambulance fees. And what we've noted is that those billings are generally 90 days plus delinquent. And so we think that's an area that the fire department really needs to focus on because of the lost revenue that is ultimately written off. We believe that to enhance collections of ambulance billings or fees, that consideration should be given to outsourcing all or part of the billing and collection process within the fire department, as is the case of many large cities such as New York, Chicago, Dallas, San Diego, and Long Beach. We also believe, as I indicated earlier under item 1, that the section code 5.181 of the city's admin code should be amended to allow for the referral of delinquent ambulance billings to the city contracted collection agencies. That can be done, we believe, sooner than later. It's been debated for quite some time, and we know that many cities, particularly those that I have mentioned, have been able to address the HIPAA concerns that have been expressed by the fire department. And with that, I'll leave it to the fire department to respond unless you have specific questions for my department.
Great, thank you. So if we could have a general comments from the fire department. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, council members. I'm Georgia Matera. I'm the fire administrator for the fire department. And
Chief Yamahata, Chief of Staff for the fire department.
First of all, let me preface this by saying that the fire department takes very seriously the recommendations and the findings both by the Controller's Office and by the Office of Finance, and that we are working diligently to address some of the concerns that they've brought to light. One of the areas, obviously, of paramount importance is the EMS, or the ambulance billing function of the department. We have been in the process of an RFP for the last 2 years, as many of you know, and we have been working with the vendors, and we've actually selected 2 vendors, and we're in the process of negotiating the contracts and the soon-to-be contracts that will come to the City Council. One of the areas that Office of Finance has brought out is that we are to refer all of our delinquent ambulance billing collections over to the Office of Finance. And as you know, we have an ordinance that exempts us from doing so. So that is a policy decision that I know that we need to discuss and it has to be made. One of the areas that we would like your support in is that we are looking at either the partial or the complete outsourcing of all of our ambulance billing functions. And we have yet to determine that until we've actually completed the negotiations with the vendors. based on what the outcome will be, we will be then prepared to draft that ordinance that will be coupled along with the contracts to say that if it goes to total outsourcing, the ordinance will then be amended to reflect that, and then we can go out and send and refer any outstanding ambulance billing to collections.
And why would you have to wait till the RFP is completed or the selection of a vendor to amend that code?
We met with the city attorney yesterday, and what the concern that was expressed was that right now, is the way the ambulance billing ordinance is drafted in terms of collections, that we will not be able to, that it has to be modified. If it's sent to if we outsource completely, the ordinance as it's written is not valid anymore because it refers specifically to fire department collections only. So we'd like to be able to delay that piece until we actually make a decision, or the council makes the policy decision as to how we would like to see our ambulance billing collections operate.
But with that, I mean, you are already selecting a vendor for, you're outsourcing already, so we would have to do that anyway, right? Why not do it simultaneously? Why wait?
We're going to do it concurrently when the reports, when the contract comes to the council. You'll actually have the revised ordinance attached to it.
Okay.
But to do it right now and then change our minds midstream to know that we're going to be contracting out, we'd have to go back and rewrite the whole ordinance over again. It would be counterproductive.
I just want to understand, and this part of it, that the RFP that you had gone out before was partly for the technical aspect of it, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so the ability, as I discussed, the handhelds that would
That's
allow that information then to be hot synced, however, whichever system you choose, that then would go electronically to the department.
Yes.
Now, you're saying that the ordinance that currently exists does not allow you to send it to delinquent accounts outside? Is that what I heard you say?
It doesn't allow us to send to collections. The way the ordinance is currently in place right now, it does not allow us to send any delinquent ambulance
You can
billing.
send it to the Office of Finance.
But they will send, there'd be no point because they would send it to collections. We're the ones, we work our bills in-house, and we have a follow-up unit that actually goes to the hospitals. We track down patient information. We're very aggressive in getting as much back as we can. But after a certain period of time, after working the account, we end up determining and
What
go
was
through
the
board of
intent? I mean, I saw some of the response, but the intent of why LAFD was different than any other department?
From what I was told many years ago, and I know it's all back in the old days, but the original intent of the ordinance was that it was for people that we provide this service regardless, and we wanted to make sure that people who needed the service would not be prohibited from calling the service, and that they could be able to be taken to the hospital and have their medical needs addressed. The original intent of even the billing process itself was that we would go after the insurance companies, we would go after Medicare, Medi-Cal, those entities that would pay, but we would not then try to get it out of the patients themselves. So we saw that as a revenue stream. We did that. We generated roughly $60 million a year. So now what's happened is we've kind of changed that position, and now we're actually going after the individual patients. And so our concern has always been...
You are doing that, or that's what you're saying?
We're going to if we send them to collections. Okay. We have been aggressive to the point that we can be aggressive, but after a certain period of time, if they're indigent, if they're homeless, if they're in jail, it's really hard to get them to pay their bill, and most of the times it will not happen. So now what we're saying is we're still going to go after them. We're going to send them to collections, and so we've actually changed our policy in a sense. And so those are the kind of conversations that we wanted to make sure that we were having and that the council was aware of, because those are...
What's the fire department's recommendation? Is to have it sent to a collection agency or not, or just kind of assume that the city's going to eat a portion of the cost? I mean, again, I know on the indigent, we could spend a lot more money and time going after that than the money that is actually owed. So there is a cost-benefit ratio as you look at that. But is there a recommendation from the department that you have verbalized before or written?
We're in agreement, and we don't have a problem with sending it to collections, but what we'd like to be able to do, and we've done this with the city attorney, is we've listed out certain categories or exemptions of people that we would not bill. Those people, the indigent, the homeless, the people who truly can't afford it. So we have that all listed, and we have it worked out in the draft. The other area of concern that we have, though, is that currently, we want to make sure that if there's any legal obligation for us, do we have to inform the patient that we're going to be sending you to collections, or you're going to have to pay a bill. Because right now, as it stands, what we do is we say, you need to come, you need to get into this ambulance and go. And if they say I can't pay, you don't understand, we say, don't worry about it, just get in the ambulance because your health is most important. If we are forced, and this is an opinion that we're asking of the city attorney, if we're in a position where now we have to inform the client, by the way, it's going to cost you close to $900 for an ALS transport, then that's going to put us in a very difficult position, because how do we implement that in the field? Because now we have an inherent conflict. Do we tell the person, you're in duress, you need to go to the hospital, oh, and by the way, we have to send you to collections if you don't pay.
And just to build on, I'm sorry, because it said I went on my own ambulance run, so I feel like I've, tested the system as it was. Mr. Weezer mentioned the question of parallel, because, we've been working on, I think it was probably 4 years ago, I introduced the motion, and it may have even been Councilmember Chick at the time, Control Chick, being able to have those handhelds. Are we ready to go with those handhelds? And can we move those forward at the same time we're determining this policy and have the flexibility to amend it? Because I think the sooner rather than later, we should see an immediate benefit of having handhelds. And because colleagues, the problem is that they're handwriting. You're a paramedic and you're writing as quickly as you can. At the same time, your partner and you are trying to save someone's life and get all the information. And person may not have their card. You've written a few numbers wrong, or their address was their old address. You have none of that ability to, without having something like that handheld.
Absolutely. There's two pieces to the RFP. There's two halves. The first half is the handheld piece, and the second half is the accounts billing, or the receivables piece. We are actually in the process of negotiating we've selected a vendor for each. They had the option of bidding on both. We had the companies bid on each one. We're selected a vendor for each side. We are beginning negotiations starting April 2nd with the vendors to get them, and they've worked together in the past to allow them to integrate their systems. So once we negotiate what the best deal is for the city in terms, can they provide the hardware and the software, what kind of percentage would they get in terms of revenue, and so those are the conversations that we're going to be having, and the cost-benefit analysis. Then we will come back to the city council with the contracts for both, as well as the revised ordinance and everything in place as quickly as we can. And the vendors are optimistic that they can actually get these out in the field and installed fairly quick.
But just happens that the city attorney, and there's questions, and we haven't decided the policy, and we don't know whether we have to tell them ahead of time. Could we move on just the handhelds if we don't have the other vendors selected for the actual collection aspect of that?
We have both of them already selected, so they're ready.
No,
so
I understand that, but if we're not ready, if the city attorney says we're not ready to determine, we have to look a little bit more, maybe a few months, as far as on the collection side of it, can we still have a contract with the vendor for the handhelds and the data being sent to the city of Los Angeles versus to an outside agency?
I think we will do whatever we can as expediently as possible, and so we will be willing to do, if we need to split it up or
My hope is they would go at the same
together.
time, but
Right.
if not, I've waited, and I know you all have waited a really long time to get this going. I just don't want to see it held up. So, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I know Mr. Zine needs to leave to
I've got to go to
his
Personnel Committee. It starts at 3, but I got a couple quick questions. The old days, the Brown ambulance, they take them to the hospital. That's exactly what they did. Since then, we've got the EMTs, the paramedics, the ALS, BLS, all that good stuff. So it's changed. We've got helicopters that take people from one location to the other. When someone gets arrested and there's a charge, criminal charge, the officers don't have to tell them it's going to cost you money to go to jail. When you get popped for a crime, you get it popped, you go through the system. I don't know why we're obligated. They're going to the ambulance. You walk into a restaurant, you got to pay. You walk into an ambulance, you got to pay. I don't know what obligation we have to tell them they're going to have to pay. It's common sense. You use a service, you're going to have to pay. Number 2, consequence for those who don't pay. Through the fire department system now, the billing, if they don't pay, are there any consequences, or is it just written off?
Currently, right now, as it stands, we do try to aggressively go back as often as we can to work the account. We have city attorney letterhead that gets sent out, and we spend a lot of time on it. But after a certain period of time, they do end up having to write it off, and those are the write-offs that you see.
So it does not go to the credit, does not affect their FICO score in any way, shape, or form?
Currently, right now, as it stands, no.
Okay, and then the other question is the PD and handhelds. The PD, police department, has some handhelds called the pods, which I understand the system has not worked well. They've got, I don't know how many thousands of those or hundreds of those. I don't know if you're dealing with the same vendor, but I've been informed that that system didn't really produce what it was supposed to produce. And you may want to connect with someone from the police department with the handhelds that they use to capture information for the, what was that called? They use that for the racial profiling. You may want to discuss to make sure that the system you're going to isn't going to have the same situation the police department had, which I understand they're scrapping the whole program, which cost God knows how many millions of dollars. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zine. How does the county, do we know how the county fares in terms of their collections and what type of systems do they have?
The county, as I know right now, has a private ambulance provider, and so they contract out for services with them. In terms of their collection rates, I need to check with my staff.
Do we know that? No, we don't know how they do. And they have, since they contract out with a private entity, they probably have a lot more flexibility in terms of how they do their collections, correct? But we don't know how they do their collections.
Don't know, but
is it
we'd
the
be
county, or do they themselves do it, the county, or does that agency, probably that entity, do it?
I believe the agency bills for their services, but we can report back if you'd like
Okay.
with some information on that.
If you
Don't
could,
know
please.
that
If
offhand.
I can just add to that, because I try to do something with the city on that measure, where they will send a county ambulance which does not have the capacity to transport. If a transport's going to be provided, it's do a private contract, and then that private contract has to go after the billing. But they'll send the county fire render rate at the scene, and then they go back to quarters, and a private ambulance is going to take it from there,
Right.
which that billing is then through a private, and I don't know how they admonish them, but it's through a private vendor, and I'm sure they're collecting money somehow or they wouldn't be in business.
Well, thank you very much. I know we have a lot more to do in this area. And one final question. If you're looking for an exception for indigent, how do you define indigent?
Don't know that offhand.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that's a good question. What we're doing is we're looking at the particular cases of, or classifications of folks, people who are transported from jail, or people who have no home address, or those types of classifications of individuals.
With this economy, is anyone making under $1 million?
And you're working on the
gotta go.
issue of false
Pardon?
alarms,
Wait.
I know, which is a different,
Okay.
we're going to hear separately. But I know you're working with LAPD on their system and potentially how that would work as well. So you all are in favor of that?
Yes, yes, we are. We're working with staff on doing research on exactly how LAPD has implemented their program, trying to mirror how they implemented it, what they charge, and so forth. And we're looking at the same type of program.
Do you have 30,000 false alarm?
Averaging about 30,000 a year for the past 3 years.
That's a lot.
Thank you. So we will continue this item as well, and if the Department of Finance and the Los Angeles Fire Department could continue to work together and give us an update on any progress within 45 days on this report. And we'll hear it together with the item number 1. Thank you very much. Item number 3.
Item number 3 is an Office of Finance report and Los Angeles Police Department and Board of Police Commissioners 2 report relative to the billing and collections operation of the LAPD Commission Investigation Division. This item is also referred to Public Safety and Budget and Finance Committees.
Okay, Antoinette Cristoval. I do want to thank Executive Director T-Fank, who's here today, and his staff for their cooperation in our review of the Los Angeles Police Department's Commission Investigative Division Unit. We identified a number of findings and recommendations, and I just want to highlight some of the items in the report and then allow the Director T-Fank to come up and speak. Some of the things that we touched on is that there is a need for full cost recovery of all police permits. We found that that is not the case, and we believe that that's very important in light of the city's fiscal situation. We understand from from Executive Director T-Fank that information has been provided to the CAO's office, so we fully recommend that move forward and be ultimately approved by the mayor and council. The other is the application of interest and penalties on all delinquent police permits. Our office is available to help the police commission and their staff, should they agree with the recommendations in the Office of Finance report. We will work closely with them on implementing or making recommended changes to the applicable ordinances for that particular permit or service, as well as make programmatic changes within our LA tax system. The other is the need to refer all all accounts to the citywide collections unit or the outside collection agencies where it is applicable. And a particular note, the need to refer permitted false alarm billings to the outside collection agencies. And with that, I'll leave it to Commissioner.
Thank you. LAPD?
Good afternoon, members. Richard T. Fank, Executive Director of the Police Commission, and joining me is Lieutenant Andre Dawson, the Commanding Officer of Commission Investigation Division. And if I might just take a few minutes to respond to the Finance Department's recommendations and the status of where we are, and then I'd like to, I think, put in context the current false alarm system that has been in place for 18 years and the dysfunction it is causing and the reason we have this issue and the remedy we have. The problem identification piece is the easy piece. The solution is the difficult piece. We think we have the solution on the horizon. But as it relates to the Finance Department's report, the request to adjust fees for all police permits, just not false alarms, but all police permits was forwarded out of our office in June of 2007 to the CAO. We also forwarded a report for the renewal fees to the CAO in August of 2007. As recently as this past week, the CAO's office has been working to refine our numbers. They've had a number of questions for us, and it's our hope that that will be done in a timely manner so it can move forward through the various processes to be implemented. The document that we sent across using the 2006 permits that we had issued would have generated $1 million in new revenue for issuance of new permits, and renewal permits would have generated about $500,000, the recommendations that we had sent forward. So that process is being evaluated by the CAO. So we have moved that on. We are now working on the fees for 2008, and we hope to have that leave in probably the next a month or so going through the process again, because we strongly believe they should be adjusted on an annual rate. I believe the controller mentioned they had not been adjusted in a number of years. To the best information we have, the last adjustment outside of alarm permit and false alarm fine penalties, they were adjusted in the late 1980s, early 1990s. So moving on to the other recommendations.
Question on the report that you submitted in August.
Yes.
That just went to CAO?
Yes.
Okay.
It went to Mayor, Council, and then they referred to CAO for evaluation, and that's where it's at this point in time. Okay. We've worked with their staff, a number of questions they've had about our analysis, the methodology we arrived at, et cetera, and I think we have been very responsive to all of their issues, and it rests with them to generate the final document.
Because as we're coming at, both of us are on the Budget Committee, whether or not, that would seem an item that we would act on expeditiously, and whether or not the mayor includes that in his budget. Or
It was our hope it would have been acted on by January 1, because January 1 is when all permits are renewed.
Yeah.
So if the new fees had been in place, that revenue would have generated about $500,000, and renewals are on an ongoing basis, new permits are on an ongoing basis, so if someone applies today, they pay the full yearly rate with the renewal in January. So that's our process and where we are at on those. As it relates to a referral of
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? We will be testing the fire life safety system. Please disregard any alarms you see or hear. Once again, we will be testing the fire life safety system. Please disregard any alarms you see or hear. Thank you.
we are referring all of the appropriate billings to outside collection and to a city attorney program we have. And I'll speak in a moment about the difficulty of that process as it relates to correct addresses. Also, as it relates to the issue of the penalty, we're operating off of the basis, as was mentioned earlier, that's codified in the city ordinance, and we arbitrarily cannot move that fee and increase it from its current $10 amount. We'll certainly work with the Department of Finance to come up with a new recommended enhancement fee for penalties if that's something that the council desires us to do.
Penalty if they have a.
Renew on time, or it's the penalty for delinquent renewal filings, delinquent payment of
It's $10.
Right, $10.
Okay.
But how much money are we talking about there if we do, I mean, I know we could only charge for whatever the fee costs us, but how much total revenue can we realize if we do increase it? But we don't know how much we would increase it. There'd be probably
That becomes difficult because, again, in a few minutes, I'll explain that. About 50% of the uncollectible amount that we have is for bad addresses. So you can't collect from a bad address, and I'll talk about that in a few moments. One of the things that also I think is important in the context of this, we do a false alarm school. That false alarm school we offer to individuals who have had a false alarm and want to come down to Parker Center. We do one in the Valley. We're moving them around the city. And that costs us about $400 a school to do. We do about 12 a year. We're moving and doing more of those. Those schools have generated for us more money than OSI as a collection agency has generated, because we have the people pay their fines, get permits if they don't have permits. Last year, we generated about $78,000 in additional revenue, and it cost us about $4,000 in overtime for the staff to do those in the evening. We see that as a very viable way to, one, get people to understand the importance of operating their alarm effectively, but two, getting the revenue in. And the interesting piece is, and anecdotally, the people that come to alarm school don't have false alarms. They understand the impact of it, the police officer response, they pay the fee.
And how do they know about the false alarms?
We advertise it on our website, they get it in a bill that they receive from us, et cetera. And interesting also, to, again, put this in context. In 2007, there were 194,000 alarm permits issued in the city of Los Angeles. 162,000 of those permit holders did not have a false alarm. So we're dealing with a very small universe of 32,000 people.
And how did that compare to
The year before?
prior to the false alarm penalties? Do we have any numbers to
I don't have that information. Okay. We can get that for you.
My hope would be that you do have figures on that the false alarm numbers have
Absolutely.
gone down
Yeah,
dramatically.
They've continued to decline. The interesting piece, again, as they continue to decline, it's still 97% of that number continues to be false alarm. And I would say, in my background in this profession, that's universal. Having worked in 3 cities, that's the universal number across the board. Let's talk about what happens when you call in for an alarm. We get alarm calls in 2 ways. One from an alarm company who is a monitoring service for the alarm subscriber, and the other is a citizen who calls in. The alarm company, if they call in, they give us a permit number. If they give us the accurate permit number, it should show up for the dispatchers, an address. If they give us an address but no permit number, we're taking that address as an accurate number. If they give us an inaccurate permit number, it can generate a wrong address, because it's all tied to permit numbers. A citizen calls in and says, I have an example here of a billing, house behind 10339 Oso in Chatsworth. That's how the call was dispatched, and that's how the bill went out. House behind. So, and approximately 50% of the false alarms, which are for non-permitted locations, the bills come back with the wrong address. So they can't be referred to collection if they are a wrong address. We brought a kind of a visual display. If you look on the back where that hand card is, that's boxes of false alarm billings that have come back to the wrong address. And the dilemma we face is this. The system that we're operating off of is a 1990s software that was created by who knows who. When you call in the alarm, the dispatcher gets that information, puts it into the computer, then dispatches the appropriate police vehicle through the MDT in the officer's car. The officer responds, the officer makes an entry, false alarm, good alarm. If it's a good alarm, they'll take a report, arrest someone, etc. If it's a false alarm, it'll have a false alarm indicator. That address, unless it is corrected by the officer, that the officer was dispatched to is the address that will be shown as the false alarm location. Let me expand on that. We get a call to 12344 4th Street, and 4th Street is a shopping center, and there's suites A through Z in the shopping center. If they don't put what suite number it is, it'll go to 12344 4th Street. It'll come back, no such address, because each suite has an individual address. So when that comes back, if we want to chase that bill down to get it to the right person, we have to then have our staff do hand searches and go through and try and find if one of those businesses has an alarm permit. If they don't have an alarm permit, we have no other way to know. And then we also go back and we look at the officers' radio logs to see if they put a correct address. So that's the level of what we try to do to chase down to get the right address. So that is really our problem today, is we have bad addresses. I can show you the bills I have here. We have one, a vacant condominium complex, 11553 Iowa, Los Angeles. We have one here that is near Rouse. We have another one, that unknown name. The one I really like is either Citibank or Washington Mutual, 2400 Overland, Los Angeles. And another one is do not contact the PR, person reporting. So that's what the communications operator is typing in, but that shows the call, and then that's what gets transmitted to ITA, which then generates the automatic billing in the envelope. It goes out to the individual. The return address is Los Angeles Police Commission. They come back to us, and now we start the trek to try and find out where that billing goes. So we can only refer billings to collection that we have a valid address to.
And how, sorry, do you want to, is it, well, one, I mean, if the officers could actually correct, I mean, but that's a little more difficult as they're going from place to place.
Sure.
Is it the PSRs that are taking the numbers?
Correct.
Is there a script you've developed that says ask if there's a suite, or ask some of the, if they can, again?
Lieutenant Dawson does a lot of that training with communications operators so that they get all of that.
Yeah, all that. And a lot of times, I don't even given the numbers yet, but we've talked about it before, of how many unpermitted alarms we have in the city that you estimate.
There's actually no way of telling, because they're non-permitted. We don't know that they're non-permitted until there's alarm activation.
Do you know from the false alarms that you get, what percentage of those are unpermitted false alarms?
About 50%, right?
Yes, ma'am.
About 50%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was some estimate of potentially millions of dollars of people who are not permitted. So if an alarm company calls in and says, I don't have a permit number, I'm just giving you the address, red flag.
That's how we find out about those.
Yes.
There is one area where we have done well. In 2004, the council implemented an ordinance creating a penalty trust fund for the purposes of replacing the burglar alarm system that we have. And that penalty assessment was $25 increments after the first fine. So the base penalty is $115 today. I believe our recommendation to the CAO was to increase that to $130 some odd dollars for full cost recovery. But the enhancement after the first one is increments of $25. So your second one would be 115 plus 25, 115 plus 50 for the second, 115 plus 75 for the third, and on. The enhancement, the increment of $25, has gone into a separate burglar alarm trust fund. That fund, the last information I had, was in the area of $7 to $8 million. In the increments of $25, I'm suggesting, it has raised that much funds to where in April of last year, during mid-year budget adjustments, a portion of that money was swept from the account.
Right.
As of today, the account has $2.6 million in it, which is the money that we need to replace our current system. And let me talk about the solution. I think we've done good problem identification. The solution. The solution is to have an integrated false alarm management and billing system. The way the system currently works, the computer-aided dispatch that the PSR operates does not interface with the false alarm system. It does not interface with the false alarm management system. What occurs today is they generate a report that goes to ITA. ITA then has a contractor who generates the false alarm billing. We then get the envelopes back that say bad address, and then we start going down the process to validate that address. We have no way today to tell you what the accounts receivable are. I have no way to tell you how much has been billed out or how much has come in. We don't generate the billing. The billing is done automatically. We identified this problem, I identified it when I first became executive director. This is not about creative new type of software and management. In my prior two agencies, this is just about sizing a system. It all works the same way. We went out to a competitive bid process last year. Proposals came back from a number of vendors. One met the criteria, which is Motorola. Their system is called CryWolf. We have negotiated with CryWolf over a period of time. The department, finance has been a part of that negotiations, and we have a completed contract that has been with the city attorney. It is finally in final review process, and it's our hope it's at the police commission in a week or two, and then it'll come across the street to mayor and city council for ultimate approval. We estimate if that follows in time frame, we will have the new system up and operational by July 1 of this year. What the new system will do is this. The new system will have its own geo-based interface to currently the computer-aided dispatch system that the PSR uses. What that is critical to, if the PSR puts an address in, the current computer-aided dispatch system has a geo file. It can identify all the valid addresses in the city. If they put an address in that is not valid, it'll come back and say not valid address. They can override that if someone is emphatic, and sometimes it does make a mistake. When they dispatch to the officer that call, that screen will pop up for the dispatcher, and it will show all the permit information. It'll show the alarm history on that call, everything about that alarm if it is a permitted alarm. If it's not a permitted alarm, it'll still have all the information. They'll get it to the officer in the car. Officer arrives, he or she does what they do. It then comes back to the computer. It updates the computer-aided dispatch system, and then automatically it will transfer that data to our staff in the Commission Investigation Division, who will be able to go in and pull that data down, individually be able to pull those calls down and look at those calls and be able to validate if they have a permit or if they don't have a permit. And also validate if it's a valid false alarm. In other words, wind blew, electrical power outage, whatever it might be. Then we can override those and we don't bill those out. So they generate the billing in Commission Investigation Division. We will generate the bill. We will mail the bill. We can give you from this system on a daily basis the amount that we have billed and the amount we have received back. We can give you on a daily basis in increments of a 24-hour day of week, the alarm calls. We can give you information instantaneously as to number of alarms at a location, whether it's permitted or not. It truly is an alarm management system, and it is a billing and collection system. But it is all integral to the information you receive at the first point of entry at the PSR. It's the old adage, garbage in, garbage out, and those boxes are the garbage that's come out, and that's where your millions of dollars is. So we have the solution. It is not that far away from us, and I think
And you have the 2.6 will pay.
we have the 2.6 is there.
Okay.
We do have to come to council for an action because when the action was taken by council last year, it capped it at a 1.5 because that was the estimate of the system at the time, but there is 2.6 in there. And what we have done in this proposal, we have rolled 5 years of maintenance costs into that 2.6. So we don't have to deal with maintenance costs for the next 5 years. It's rolled into the program. And that's about $300,000 a year.
And could you, with the fire department potentially being part, I don't know how the two systems, I know they're talking to you about that, but.
They would have to have their own software system because it comes off, again, the computer-aided dispatch system. They dispatch themselves.
Right.
It would have to generate off of their system. Now, the sizing of their system could be certainly smaller, I think. So, and that would drive the number of licensing software and hardware applications you would have to have. But that's the fix. And I think that certainly.
We're this close to getting the.
Yeah, we are there. And this is a situation where technology will fix this. Yeah. And it doesn't need more people. And the beauty of this in working with finance and gaining their cooperation, this also will include the interface into LA Tax. So it will be able to transmit the information to LA Tax. So when the bill is paid to finance, they'll update the account, and then we can go online and see on a daily basis what's been paid and updated and what the accounts receivable are.
Because you also could, I would think, if these are businesses, not necessarily residents, and I don't know the percentage of false alarms, which ones are which ones are which or how much, but whether or not if they have their business taxes and they aren't paying their fees, or they, those, to be that kind of interaction that would, be
The beauty of it, it will interface with LA Tax, which is great for us, it's great for finance, and I think it's a win-win for the city, because one, we're able to manage the system better, and then we're able to collect the money in a much more expeditious manner, and be able to track the scofflaws who we don't have good addresses on, which is our big issue. And we are working for a response to the motion you introduced, Councilwoman, related to the looking at the alarm companies doing the collection, et cetera. We have a staff report completed on that, and we should be sending that over in the next couple of weeks.
were we right in that you could tell, I want to compliment the Police Commission, particularly LAPD, on this instance, because they have really, as you can see, they live and breathe this and have really been effective and from a very difficult situation where we were not going to respond to any false alarms, and to, this was prior to you coming to the council. It was a very heated debate, and we thought we were going to have something go back to the commission. We 245 back and forth. It was entertaining, I guess, for that time, but something good came out of that, I think, for everyone. Good results. But was I accurate in what I had been told, which was the state legislation doesn't allow us to have the permitting, the alarm companies to pay us for those permits?
The current analysis of the city attorney is the alarm company cannot be required to pay the fine of their subscriber. What we can do, not under our current ordinance, but one of the recommendations in the staff report will be for council consideration, that we amend our ordinance to require, when an alarm company installs an alarm, that the subscriber have a valid alarm permit at the time of installation, or the alarm company providing the alarm would take receipt of the funds and apply that to the city and submit for the permit for the alarm subscriber.
Because I think our problem is, which we tried to get at the time, was the alarm companies to share with us who their customers were, so that we could get the permit fees from them. And of course, they were unwilling, and I saw part of why they didn't want to. I mean, they didn't want to share all that proprietary information, even though we had said we'd keep it, within the police commission.
The benefit for us having a valid permit is, one, we get the revenue from the basic first permit and the annual permit. But more important than that, we have accurate information as to who the alarm subscriber is, who the responsible parties are in the event there is a call at that home.
It benefits
and it benefits the alarm subscriber. And we find that in our alarm classes, many of the people that come say, the alarm company never told me I had to have a permit.
Right.
They just sold me the alarm.
And I think one of the other things we had discussed was if there wasn't the ability to ensure that the alarm companies were getting their clients, in essence, having permits, that you'd almost have a building and safety permit that they would be required to, and then we would have that information, so that you couldn't put an alarm in someone's home without them having a permit by the building and safety, which would then require, we'd know who got a permit to put it in. Again, they still could get around that and say they didn't get a building and safety permit, but I think we're just trying to get a way to make sure
we think
for the safety of the individual, as well as for financial reasons.
The recommendation to amend the ordinance to require the subscriber or the alarm installer to have a valid permit at the time will certainly help us in that area, because currently the ordinance says no person shall install an alarm, et cetera, without a valid permit, but it doesn't fix who that person is. Okay. What we're suggesting would be it'll all be in our report.
So why don't we
that
do
concludes
this?
us.
Why don't we also continue this for 45 days, and any Department of Finance and LAPD could come up with any unresolved issues and report to us on the progress. And also, if you could give us an estimated timeline on some of the solutions you reported on today, just to kind of get a sense of when we could see the realization of those solutions. And we'll hear this item in 45 days with the other two reports.
Hopefully at that time we'll have an executed contract.
There you go.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with the concurrence of my colleague Wendy Gruhl, this committee meeting is...
Public comment?
Are there any public comment? Any cards? Anyone wishing to speak on any item? Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, it's like one of my pet.
Oh, that's fine.
I apologize.
Glad there's some institutional...